As I said in my speech, I'm speaking directly to the young people of this country. And in my speech, I had mentioned about how drones are changing warfare. So I wanted to go a little bit deeper into that idea. So here is a drone. This is a DJI drone made in China. And that's a battery, lithium polymer battery. These are 4 brushless DC motors, and that's the camera. So what I was saying was that when you connect these brushless motors to this battery, give it a camera, and allow people to communicate directly with this through FPV unit, you change warfare. This little thing is now making tanks, artillery pieces, large weapons in the Ukraine battlefield pretty much obsolete. I said that industrial systems fight wars. This is actually a commercial product. This is made by a Chinese factory called DJI, and this is actually a toy, right? What we are seeing here is innovative technology of the motor, high quality optics, telecommunication equipment, and essentially a bunch of cell phone batteries set together are allowing this thing to transform the battlefield. Earlier, the Air Force used to operate, let's say, for the most part, above 10,000 feet. And if you wanted, if a local unit, fighting unit wanted air support, they had to call the Air Force, and then the Air Force had to send the plane. And the plane was big, very expensive, etc. So now what has happened is the Air Force has merged with the platoon, right? So now the platoon itself has its own Air Force, can use that Air Force to strike opponents, and can observe the battlefield. So what has happened is the Air Force has suddenly come all the way to the ground level, and it's built a completely different reconnaissance concept at a much lower level, which means that the battlefield has become much more transparent. You just put a drone up there and then you can see everything that's going on, and then individual units can send their drones to attack. So it's almost illuminated the battlefield in a way that has never been done before, and it's also allowed kinetic energy to be moved around very effectively and targeted very accurately. And the reason it's happened is because of the electric motor and the battery and optics combination. Underwater warfare has also been changed by this thing, because this thing now you can put it into a little ship or into a little submarine and you can sink huge destroyers, things like, I mean, for example, an aircraft carrier, they're going to be sitting ducks. And yes, American carrier groups would probably be able to defend themselves, but your regular aircraft carrier will simply not be able to survive an environment where these drones are roaming around undersea. So it is the optics and communication system are allowing you to see the battlefield, see the sea in a completely different way. And then the electric motor is allowing you to target very, very accurately, put explosive power very accurately where you want. And this has revolutionized how accurately you can target kinetic energy. We have to build such a system. And we have to have competence in electric motors. We have to develop competence in optics. We have to develop competence in batteries. This is what is going to be at the heart of the electric vehicle. This is what's going to be at the heart of all robotics. This is what's going to be at the heart of drones. This is what's going to be at the heart of submarines. This is going to be at the heart of toys, warfare, everything. And the sad fact is that we're nowhere here. We don't make any of the components inside this. We don't understand how it's made. We certainly don't make any of the optics. We don't understand how it's made. And that's what my speech was getting at, that this is actually where we should be playing. And the network that produces this is where the real value is. And all AI is actually going to be operating on this network. So for example, when this thing is built, AI is going to be used to order how it's built. When this thing is used, AI will determine how it's used. So when I hear talks about, I heard the Prime Minister say we are going to be number one in AI. I mean, it's complete junk, because you cannot be number one in AI unless you have a production network, or not so effective, but at least you have consumption data. And India has given away its consumption data to large multinational companies, and India doesn't even play in the production space. And so that, what I was saying in the speech, is actually it's an industrial vision. And it's essentially saying that we're going to move differently. The reason this thing is so powerful is it can go places that a missile can never go. It can go places a gun can never go. It can chase people, it can hide, it can go into jungles, it can do all sorts of stuff that other weapons cannot do. Right? So that's what we have to understand, that there's a new industrial revolution taking place, a new way of moving taking place. And it's going to be based on this circular motion. Essentially, it's going to transform everything. And what I want, or what I'd like, is that we have thousands and thousands of young Indian people who deeply understand this. And we have another thousands and thousands who deeply understand this. And then thousands and thousands who deeply understand this. And then we've got the core of an industrial system. The last generation industrial system was about mastering the internal combustion engine. And the tragedy right now is that we're talking about all sorts of stuff, but we're not talking about this. And this is, I want Indian imagination to fly like this thing does. War is always about distribution of kinetic force. Kinetic force kills people. How you get kinetic force to kill people is really what war is. This thing completely revolutionizes how kinetic energy moves on the battlefield. So, for example, if you compare this to a bullet can only move in a straight line, right? This can move up, down, left, right, backwards. It can stop in space. If you're comparing this to a tank shell can only move in a straight line. If you're comparing it to a missile can maneuver, but then a missile can't suddenly stop in the middle of the sky. A missile can't maneuver in such a sophisticated, complicated manner. Right? So this is literally a revolution. And the interesting thing about this, and this is what I keep telling my American friends, is that this doesn't come from the military system. American drones all come from the military system, meaning they trickle down. This has come from the toy industry. Right? This has emerged from the commercial system. And that's really the powerful thing. Because if things are emerging bottom up, then the amount of innovation that will emerge from that is significantly more than if they're going top down, right? So this motor, brushless motor, actually, I first saw it, 15, 20 years ago in a remote control plane. This used to be a hobby. This is a hobby I've had for 30, 40 years. And earlier there used to be small engines, very complicated to build, very complicated to fly. And the real innovation was the brushless motor. And then the batteries. Because earlier the batteries were just way too big and the brushless motors were inefficient. The motors were inefficient, and now they're very powerful. They all coordinate. So this is actually a revolution. This is where the technological wave is. Now people think that you can make in India. You can have an Adani Defense or somebody else make in India and you'll get this. You won't. All Adani Defense does, or all our defense guys do, is actually assemble. This emerges from a production network. This is the result of a production network. And that's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about that we now sit and we get a company that makes something that looks like this. That's not really interesting, because this will be obsolete anyway. But if we have the network from which this emerges, then we will never be obsolete. We'll just be at the edge of the technology curve, right? Understands, for example, the importance of what these cameras do. This thing without this camera, ineffective as a weapon of war. So the camera has to come together with the motor, has to come together with the battery, has to come together with all the components. And now what's very interesting is the Americans and the Europeans have understood this. They've understood that actually they don't have the production system that can create this, and they can never have it. Because they're at a stage in their development where for them building this is almost impossible. But we can do it. Right? We have the engineering know-how. We have the scale. We can potentially develop a strategy where we become, if not masters, at least very competitive in this area. So that's the type of thing that my speech was trying to do.